And here we are. Today we're talking about Book 9 of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So are there any passages that stood out to you, PatMan, while reading this book? Or any thoughts that you had and wanted to discuss?
I honestly haven't got a chance to read book 10 and go over everything. But if you have any notes,
Well,
maybe we can,
we're just doing Book 9 for today again.
or book 9, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't get really a chance to take too many notes, but I wrote one line down that really resonated with me, and it was, "It is in thy duty to leave another man's wrongful act there where it is." So we could talk about that for a little bit.
All right.
It depends on what the wrongful act is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if the man rapes your wife, you're never going to forgive him. But if he just stole your, like, tonsils, holy shit.
I think
Yeah, if you stole your body part, fucking, what's it called?
Yeah, there's a difference between this and justice. I'm thinking in like this context, it's more like
These sort of petty things.
yeah. Like if you see someone else just commit a wrongful act that you know is only really gonna hurt themselves in the long run, and it's not really gonna affect you as much, then you should just, move on from it. Don't carry it along with you.
I think what he's saying is that, like if you don't like furries or something, and you're not a furry, then don't worry about him being a furry. But if he wrongs you, then sure.
Yeah, there's a difference between if he wrongs you and just a wrongful act towards himself.
It's sort of considered degenerate, I guess. I think that's what he's talking about. And degenerate is, iffy. But, like, I mean, what's a dude fapping a furry porn to you? Like, he's not doing anything to you. Just let it go.
Exactly. Live and let live.
Not really worth your energy or anything.
I think it's like a deeper part of live and let live. And the proper way of how to react to something that you see is absolutely negative.
Does he also talk about death?
Well, Stoicism does draw a lot of parallels to death, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's as much of it in this specific book, but he definitely touches on the life and death cycle. And here's another line from this book. "Do not despise death, but be well content with it, since this too is one of those things which nature wills. For such as it is to be young and to grow old, and to increase and to reach maturity, and to have teeth and beard and gray hairs, and to beget, to be pregnant, and to bring forth in all other natural operations what the seasons of thy life bring also its dissolution. This then is consistent with the character of a reflecting man to be neither careless nor impatient nor contemptuous with respect to death." So that's what he's got to say there.
What page is that?
For me, it's 113. I don't know exactly where it is on the ebook.
What's the passage before it?
The paragraph before that starts with, "It would be a man's happiest lot to depart from mankind without having any taste of lying and hypocrisy and luxury and pride."
Like, Bibles 31, 32, 33, 34.
Oh, mine's not numbered.
35, 36.
It's a different translation. It's not numbered on mine.
And then this is book 9. This is book 10. So it's probably within here. Probably find it actually.
So
give me a
first
passage. Fucking give me a line.
Okay, I'll go back to the first one that I read. "Do not despise death, but be well content with it, since this too is one of those things which nature wills. For such as it is to be young and to grow old, and to increase and to reach maturity, and to have teeth and beard and gray hairs, and to beget and to be pregnant, and to bring forth, and all other natural operations, which the seasons of thy life bring. Such also is disillusion. This, then, is consistent with the character of a reflecting man, and to be neither careless nor impatient nor contemptuous with respect to death, but to wait for it as one of the operations of nature.
The book here that you provided me gives me a different translation. Do not despise death, but accept it willingly. Look upon it as the product of nature, one of those things which Providence has been pleased to order. For such as are youth and age, growth and manhood, down and gray hairs, pregnancy and birth, and all natural actions, instants of life, so also is dying. A wise man, therefore, must neither run giddily nor impatiently and contemptuously into his grave. He must look upon death's nature as business, and wait her leisure as he does for the progress and maturity of other things. For as you wait for a child to come into the world when it is ready, so you should stay into the other case till things are ripe, and your soul drops out of the husk of her own accord.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of differences there.
A couple, yeah.
This is actually very interesting, just the way of looking at death like that. It's similar to what Alan Watts talked about in his own lectures about. He says that we often put off death because we are often afraid of it, or we're afraid to talk about it with somebody else.
Yeah.
So being content with it near the end of your own life, even if things are pretty much bad as they are, we have to be willing to accept it. And Alan Watts also mentions that you should treat death like a guest, where you have your entire family around you in the hospital. And instead of just mourning your impending death and your family members are crying, you should treat it as an act of celebration. You know, pop the champagne and bring in the morphine. Let's have a good time here. Let's have a good time here. And as you are about to accept that, like graduation or getting that new job promotion.
Yeah.
But also be willing to, I mean, just be willing to observe everything around as it all happens too.
Yes. And it goes back to the other part that Marcus Aurelius talks about, taking things at first glance. Death is just death, and life happens again, and it's just a big recycling process.
You also have to think about how your family thinks of death, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of different dimensions.
If your grandfather is sitting there dying, do you think he wants you to sit there and cry? Or do you think he wants there, you know, crack open a fucking beer, have fun, celebrate his life? Like, yeah, you're going to cry, but are you going to celebrate his life somberly, or are you going to celebrate his life the way he wants it to? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's interesting to see the way different cultures grieve for the loss of life.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Lots of
European cultures.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of parallels between Stoicism and the Eastern religions that Alan Watts and those people are into.
And then you can go to Asia, you can go to Africa, and it's all different things. But like, there's always kind of a respect for the dead. You know?
Yeah, respect for the ancestors.
That's pretty much a universal constant with human beings, you know?
Yeah, you don't see too many cultures that completely neglect the loss of life. There's always something there. Whether you acknowledge it as the intelligence of the universe at work, or just, you know, a close person getting taken away from you, there's always something there.
It's sort of like a ritual, in a way.
Like, lots of life affects everybody, in every culture.
Yeah.
And you don't really see a loss of respect for elders or like any sort of kind of iconoclasty that really rises from like a sort of counterculture that would be in an established culture like in the Western culture. But you don't see that kind of thing. Like in tradition, yeah, you honor your ancestors, you honor your elders, and you honor their wisdom and you respect them.
And yet, cultures
And
all around the
you,
world all have a different way of going about it.
but you don't see a disrespect in the elders, do you? Like I can't think of a single culture that disrespects their elders. Not even like a hyper feminist culture. They always respect their mothers. So
In Old Norse culture, they used to, when they got to a certain age and they were no longer of a use to the group, they would just let them kill themselves, jump off a cliff or something. And that was just how they handled it.
well, yeah, but they're still honored, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It was considered like a heroic act in honoring the gods to end your own life so you're not a burden on all the people that you're leaving behind.
Yeah. So has always been sort of a honorary factory, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Age always comes with certain connotations of wisdom and
Wisdom,
respect.
yeah. I was about to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, so that goes back to one of the rituals you were talking about, PatMan. Like that
Um,
form of suicide could be considered one of those death rituals, and then the culture gets together afterwards and
yeah, I was thinking about how each culture goes about their own way of ending a life, or is about to end, or if their life is about to end. What are some of the rituals that they like to go
Before we get into that question, let me ask you
through?
two things. Are both of you American?
I'm a Canadian.
Yeah.
Close enough. I mean, I've been to Canada. It fucking sucks, but I can hear it in your accent, kinda, actually. My girlfriend's Canadian.
Well, there you go.
What about you, Batman?
American, Irish.
Fuck yeah. All right, so how would you, as just you, with like no cultural or whatever binds, how would you handle your grandfather's death? Or how have you handled your grandfather's death if it happened?
Well, I don't really remember my grandfather that much. I
What
honestly,
about your father?
well, he's a bit of an old school guy, so I would suggest he would probably say something. Don't worry about me. Just gather around me and say your last words before I part. Something.
Something sort of selfless, isn't it?
Yeah.
What about you, Ragmo?
Well, I think the main thing would be to be the one to support everyone else in the situation as well, and kind of work through my own pain by being the one for everyone else to lean on. That's how I handled it when my grandmother recently died, anyway. I had to really be there for my mom.
My grandfather on my dad's side died of a drunk driving accident. And then my step granddad on that side killed himself. I don't really know my
That's
grandmother on my
heavy.
dad's side.
That's heavy, man. Sorry.
But on my mom's side, my grandmother, my grandfather have always been there for me. My great grandma has always been there for me. And if I could, I'd deliver every single one of their eulogies. Talk about how immensely wise and strong and kind they were. But I know these people. I've known them for all of my life. They've been alive for almost 3 times as long as I have. I really don't think that they would let me get away with being miserable and crying and shit. Like, yeah, you're gonna cry, you're gonna feel terrible about it, but fuck it, drink, celebrate what they did in life.
Yeah.
They wouldn't want you to feel bad. I sure as hell know that my grandparents wouldn't. I sure as hell know that my family wouldn't. My mother and my father, they absolutely fucking, they wouldn't want a burial or anything. They just want their cremated corpses spread across somewhere beautiful and then some nice words said. And then they leave me some money for alcohol and then I can just throw a party. But that's what they do. But that's kind of the thing that I grew up with. It's hands off for the most part. But you can look at family dynamics. Like, Virginia doesn't really have that sort of culture, you know? America in general doesn't have that sort of culture. But it's spread out, sort of, you know? But you can still draw parallels towards every other culture on the planet because the basic ideal is the same. You're honoring your ancestors, you're honoring the people that have been there for you, your family, your elders, people you respect, people that raised you. And it's always going to be there with you. Their teachings, their lessons, their lifestyle, fucking everything about them. That's an impact on you. That's shaped you. That's how you are now because of what they were. And I think that's intrinsic to every single human on the planet. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
It's the human experience.
Yeah, and that
That's
works into
what we
different
are.
religions, different cultures, different
Oh, yeah.
nationalities.
Like, everybody's basically the fucking same. It's just kind of, you live at this altitude, you live at this latitude, and your ancestors did it for thousands of years, so now you have adaptations for this climate versus this climate, and this culture versus this culture, based on climate and what we had, you know?
Yeah, and we don't really have a set of guidelines here in North America for when someone passes away. Like, everyone kind of has their own different method. Like, you could look at the old Norse tradition and see how they handled it and go to the shamanistic traditions.
To put my father's corpse on and then shoot a flaming arrow on it, I think he would think that that was metal as fuck. And I think he would like it. Fortunately for me, I don't think he's going to be passing away for a long time. At the very least, to see his fucking grandkids.
What else is in book 9? I don't recall. Is this a short book compared to the?
Yeah, it's only a 12.
Consider how many physicians are dead that used to knit their brows over patients. How many astrologers who thought themselves great men by foretelling the death of others? How many philosophers have gone the way of all flesh after they learned disputes about dying and immortality? How many warriors who knocked so many brains out? How many tyrants who managed the power of life and death with so much insolence, as if themselves had been immortal? How many cities, I may say so, have given up the ghost? For instance, Hellas in Greece, Pompeii, Herculaneum, Italy, not to mention many besides. And trails off from there. But he's speaking about the futility of things here and why you should care. Passage 48 leads into passage 49, which tells you, stand firm like a rock against which, though the waves batter, yet it stands unmoved, and they fall at rest to last. Oh, God, I can't read. And they fall to rest at last. You can consider this as sort of a kind of like a nihilism versus idealism, of why you should consider either.
Yeah.
I don't know what page this is on for you, so.
Yeah. I think I I'm picking up what you're laying down. Kind of reminds me of the old adage of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But here we have a Roman emperor who had all the power he could have wanted, and he kept himself from letting it corrupt him.
He kept himself humble. Like music.
Exactly.
He mused on all of his flaws. He didn't sit there and think that he was a fucking god. Wasn't no Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius is a smart man.
But I also wonder, like, how many other times in history has that actually happened? And what other methods they could have used to humble themselves.
What has? No.
Just a
Defeat. Something like that. Like, you can look at that all over the fucking place. Pretty much any religion is humbling yourself before a god. And any dogmatic practice is humbling yourself, you know?
But then on the other side of that, you have the king or the emperor that sees himself as the closest to God and above everyone else, and then it eventually corrupts them. So I don't think religion is really the answer to that, because
Not an answer.
Marcus
So
Aurelius,
much as,
Marcus Aurelius used his own writings of Stoicism in his meditations, and that didn't come from a higher power, that just came from his perception of reality.
Oh, yeah. But his perception of reality shares many similar traits to pretty much every other religion and every other kind of philosophy, basically propagated throughout the ages, you know? Like, they all have one common theme, and that's humility. I don't think there's any single fucking thing that I've ever read about, not even anarchism, that places the individual above everything else. It's always the group. It's always the higher power. It's always something besides you. Even when it's you have the power, you have the responsibility, you have this and that and whatever. It's not your decision. It's something that you're granted. It's something that happens to you.
How do you feel about that, PatMan? You've been quiet.
It brings up a question that I have. Don't we all have a specific kind of power within us? Do we share the same power? Based
Well, it depends on what you mean.
Well, we mentioned that Marcus Aurelius looked at everything around him, his own perception. He didn't follow any other people in the past. So did he create his own power and share that?
I think what he
Spread
did
that kind of
was
power?
he had his own power, and then he used that to kind of influence other people, you know? Like, what I mean is, yeah, he has these thoughts, and he got raised in a certain environment, but what really happened wasn't that it was some sort of internal power struggle, and then eventually he won out, and he got this, like, perfect thing. It's more that he kind of studied it and then thought about it, reflected upon it, and then he realized that he was happiest doing this. Like, you got to understand, humans' social power is the greatest thing that could ever possibly exist, so far as we know.
Yeah, the metaphor exists above everything else.
Like, a group of humans can do basically fucking anything, provided they have the right skills and motivation, etc. But that all has to come from inner strength. And inner strength you can only reach by solitude and reflection and other things like that. Like, if you go to parties all the fucking time, yeah, okay, you're gonna make some social links, sure, but you're not gonna grow spiritually. And you're gonna be sitting there going, fuck, I feel empty. What do I do? You're gonna be lost. Meanwhile, if you sit there and just sit alone forever, you're going to walk out of the world, you're not going to know how to fucking talk to people. And it's always going to be a balance.
Yeah, in our last meeting we were talking about different methods of training your social faculties and intellectual faculties to make a more well-rounded system for yourself.
Well, the best way I can improve cognition is math. The best way I can improve social cognition is just go out, talk to people, have conversations about random shit. But you have to do it face to face, and you have to have it like physically. Because body language is a huge part of it. Like, I'm lucky, I can just drive down to the river and I can talk to whoever. And they're usually drunk enough that they're down for whatever fucking conversation. But a lot of people don't have that, so they have to stick to internet shit, you know?
That and reading and pretty much just communicating in any way you possibly can within your own means. Becoming
And
a part of your
reading is
community.
absolutely valid. Absolutely. But without a way to communicate it, you're just going to be alone.
What were you saying,
And a
PatMan?
dude with like 4 or 5 friends, he's always going to be more powerful.
I said that writing is another.
I would think that writing and reading are one and the same in terms of like a social link, you know?
I don't know about that. Like when I'm reading and then I take notes afterwards, it makes a lot of a difference, and it like adds on to the experience afterwards. After I've written something out, I can understand it a lot better than if I had just read it.
Well, yeah, it's because you're burning it into your mind. It's a dedicated action. It's something that you do. It's a proactive kind of thing. I'm not using the right words. But you know what I mean. It's an action, and actions are better than like reaction. So yeah, you can read something, but if you write it down, you'll remember it better. But at the same time, reading it is kind of necessary for writing it down. And if you don't read it, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But at the same time, that's not the same thing as like talking to somebody about it. So I would classify reading and writing as kind of the same thing, or at least the same part of your brain that you use, because it's all a physical action that you take, and it's stored in the same part of the memory. Meanwhile, if you see a hot girl, you're going to remember how she walks, her smile, whatever. That's stored in a completely different part of the memory. And so I guess I'm saying like a logical kind of thing versus like an emotional type of reaction, you know?
Yeah.
And one can bleed over into the other, which I guess kind of makes spirituality, which is kind of what Stoicism is, but I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of see a similar pattern to that. That's essentially what I was thinking. What about you, Rugmo?
I still think that the action of writing can still unlock things that you didn't know you read. I might be just splitting hairs here, but
Well, I think you remember everything that you read. I just don't think that your brain thinks that everything that you read is important enough to store all of it. But writing it down makes your brain go, oh, well, we're doing this now, so I guess it's worth storing. So I guess I'll remember this passage and this about this passage, and
yeah,
etc.
maybe the point I'm trying to get at is it helps to write when you're working through your own thoughts, because you're making it physical.
Oh,
You're,
absolutely.
you're creating something in the physical world that you can go back to and read, as opposed to just processing the ideas of other people. So I guess it's the same in the way that you were talking about, but I find a lot of value in it that goes beyond
Therapeutic.
just yes.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of value in writing things down. Even more so than typing things down. Like, you type your email, your password to your Discord. Okay. If you
Yeah.
write this shit down, you're never going to forget it.
Definitely just writing on paper with a pen or a pencil feels a lot more authentic than typing it all out.
Well, that's because it uses a part of your brain
Yeah,
that's basically the same as reading. You kind of have to read what you write, you know?
Yeah, and when you're typing it out, you can just be staring at the keyboard the whole time.
Yeah, you don't really pay attention to what you type.
Yeah, I have tons of notebooks for that.
Yeah, I just went to the dollar store the other day, picked up a bunch of notebooks to expand on
But
my
writing it down, you have to write every single individual letter. With the keyboard, you just hit it. There you go. So you type to your girlfriend, I love you. Okay, great. You write a letter to your girlfriend and say, I love you. It's a hell of a lot more, I guess, mentally engaging to write it down than to type it out.
Feels more human.
Not just that. You break it down into like its bare characteristics. It's a hell of a lot more effort to write down every single thing. And basically a struggle in the most broad terms that I could possibly put it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way whenever I have an idea for a story, I have to think very carefully about how to structure it.
Whenever I
And
think of a story, I just think of all the things that I'm interested in and refine those by those. So I have good ideas, but I can't execute them whatsoever because I'm fucking shit at writing. And I guess that kind of highlights like a disconnect between the brain and how it reacts with the physical world as opposed to like writing it down. Like I can think all this shit all day, but if I don't do anything with it, it's worthless.
Yep.
Like imagine if Marcus Aurelius didn't write down his musings, he just dictated them. It wouldn't be nearly as powerful. It wouldn't be coming from him, it'd be coming from somebody that's translating his subscription, fuck. Words. You know what I mean?
So we're almost at an hour now. PatMan, we were going to talk about some of the books that you were reading for the month of February.
Yeah, I've been reading 5 books this month. I'm down to 2 more to go. They're nonfiction. I finished Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein, Quiet American by Graham Greene. So now I'm down to there's this book on negotiation and also this one by Malcolm Gladwell called David and Goliath. And that book is about how many prominent people throughout history who started off pretty much small and how they used various tactics to take down the big boys, the big guys who were in power. And Gladwell uses the story of David and Goliath. And he talks about how David, this young boy, is a slingshot who goes up against this huge beast, Goliath. And he uses the metaphors and that entire story to illustrate many prominent people throughout history, like how, like
Well, that entire story in the first place is a biblical passage.
Yeah.
They didn't use a slingshot though. They used a sling. That
sling. Yeah.
thing that you whip around your hand and then you let go one of the ends.
Yep.
And then you let it like a metal ball go. But that's also a story that's common in pretty much every religion. The little guy who's stoic and heroic and virtuous versus this big untouchable creature that symbolizes sin, decay, degeneracy, things like that. That's a common theme in fucking pretty much every religion. But David Goliath is the most prominent one because it's Christianity, it's the most written about. But it's absolutely a valid thing. Like, you can absolutely be more virtuous and take down somebody who's way bigger than you and isn't as virtuous through your own virtue alone. That's kind of what the story's about. To lead a more holistic life and then to be better about it, as opposed to leading a rich life and then falling. Because no person is invincible. Even a small man can take you down. Even you can be unpopular. Even somebody like David, who's diminutive and small, can take you down. Somebody who's relatively considered invincible. Now suddenly people are questioning you. Questioning your morals, questioning your lifestyle, questioning you as a person. Thinking, why do I follow you? Why would I follow you?
Late 20s. 27.
This man represents my ideals better than you do. I don't care if you're popular. I'm going to follow him. And he took him down with a sling. A rock that he whipped really hard and then killed a giant with. It's actually kind of beautiful.
Very easy, too.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of a warning. Like, don't aspire for huge fucking houses and like 80 cars and yada, yada, yada. Buy your fucking mom a house. Buy your dad a house. Fucking provide for your family. Be humble. You won't fall. Or you can be in the NBA and spend bazillions of fucking dollars on shoes and cars and whatever and then get broke. And then you fade out of obscurity. And who the fuck remembers you? Can you remember any basketball players from the 80s? I sure as fuck can't. How about football players? They were giants back in the day. What the fuck happened to them? But the ones that are humble, the ones that are popular, the ones that save up and keep their empire going, they're still around. They're still household names. It's basically, don't let fame, fortune, whatever the fuck get to you. Always be humble. Even if you're on top of the fucking world, even if you have every single formulaic power that you could possibly get, be humble. Remember what you were. Remember what you are. Remember where you came from.
Be humble and be grateful.
Exactly. Don't shrug off your origins because you're rich now. You came from shit. You were growing in shit. That's not shameful. And if you were growing in rich blood and you continue that rich bloodline, that's not shameful. What's shameful is if you take that for granted. If you sit there and go, I don't really give a fuck about my ancestors' achievements. I'm just going to use it to do what I want. Then, yeah, no, that's shameful. But if you sit there and go, I'm going to build on my father's empire, and I'm going to make this the best possible life that I could for me, my wife, husband, whatever, my kids, my family, then yeah, absolute fucking loot. Then that's not shameful at all. Even if you grew up poor, even if you grew up rich.
So I'm about to finish those two stories or those two books. And I'll start writing the blog about it sometime next.
Very nice. His Mind's blog is in the description as always. I think that just about wraps it up, boys.
Yep.
Well, it was good talking to you.
All right.
Good talk.
Unless you want to talk about something else and have me completely go off topic.
I think that was a good talk. So, gentlemen, may the force be with you.
See you next week.
Peace.
One love.